Hi, my name is Vicky Morell. I'm the Accounting Partner Director here at Source Advisors. Source Advisors has been around for nearly as long as the R&D tax credit scheme itself, and we continue to provide support and assistance for accountants and their clients. Welcome to At Source, our series where we talk about all things R&D tax. Today, I'm joined by Deb Chappell, our R&D Director here at Source Advisors, and also Matt Legon from Gnaw Chocolate. Hi, both.
Hello.
Would you like just to introduce yourselves? Matt.
So I'm Matt, the CEO of Gnaw Chocolate, a chocolate manufacturer based in Norwich in Norfolk, founded in 2011. We're very much an innovative, sustainable and ethical chocolate producer. And we're here today to talk about R&D.
Hi, thanks, Vicky. Deborah Chappell, R&D Director, as you say. So I've been a specialist in R&D now for 12 years. And prior to that, I have had a lifetime, shall we say, of being a tax professional. So I've navigated both for specialisms in personal tax, corporate tax, etc. But fundamentally, my heart is well and truly vested in R&D.
I guess to kick off probably the conversation, Matt, do you want to just give us a little bit more background to Gnaw Chocolate? Sort of how long you've been around, sort of what is it that you do?
Okay, so we are a family-owned innovative chocolate brand and manufacturer in Norwich. Started 15 years ago, so 2011. Interesting journey of creating fun chocolates was really the concept at the beginning. We very much focus on being sustainable and ethical, and the way that we source our cocoa and eradicating slave labor in the process. And we like to think of ourselves as a real honest British chocolate brand.
Perfect. So before we kick off into the inquiry, just give us a little bit of an overview of your R&D activity, what you were doing around that sort of world of innovation.
Okay, so for us, we just built a new factory, so spent in excess of £1.7 million on a new factory to try and take us to the next level in terms of productivity and efficiency and ability, actually, of trying to take the business to that next step.
So moving on to the inquiry then, inquiry letter lands on your desk from HMRC saying there's a compliance check into your R&D tax credit claim. How did you feel? What was the initial reaction? Were there any concerns? Was it sort of like, oh gosh, how did you feel when you had that first letter from HMRC?
I would say, oh no, here we go. I think that's probably a good summary. I think with HMRC, let's be honest, as any business owner will know and appreciate, that it's those four letters that bring that sort of fear, because it's like, oh, here we go. Even if you know that you're absolutely valid and completely right and everything is going to be fine, it's that, right, the work. Here's the work, the level of work this is going to take. Do I have the headspace? Do I have the time? Do I have the dedication? What have I got to get our teams to do? And it's not just for me or our senior leadership team. It's for everybody. I think it's that daunting thing, isn't it? It's always that daunting, here we go. Is this going to be a 1 week process? Is it going to be, a 2 week? Is it going to be a year and a half? And I think for us, it was the year and a half. And so is that interesting? Is that sort of like, that when you first get it, you just don't know. And I guess it's the unknown, it's the fear. And I think I'm not alone in saying that.
Obviously, it's great that you've now reached that successful conclusion. But how has that journey been? If you reflect on that year and a half that you just mentioned, Matt, has it been challenging? Has it been quite straightforward? Has it been an absolute headache? So how has that actually sort of manifested itself in reality for you? And obviously, Deb, great to hear your thoughts on that as well.
Of course.
I think the word challenging is probably pretty accurate, but I think when you get an inquiry come through, you've got to stay firm to your beliefs and your confidence in what we've done and what we've put through. I think for us, we were confident in our R&D activity. We were confident in the information, the report that had been provided, and the work that Source Advisors had done with us, because it is a partnership as opposed to it's very much a partnership where we work together to get the information accurate from the outset. And so if you can stick and sit behind that knowledge and confidence that actually what we did was right, fundamentally, you've got nothing to worry about. It doesn't mean it doesn't worry you, because it does. I mean, have I had sleepless nights? Yeah, loads. Have I had this, this fear of how long is it going to take, but also what are the outcomes? What's the consequences? How do you deal with that process? Yeah, and I think everybody, it's natural to have those thoughts. Is it a challenge? Absolutely. It's been a year and a half of headache, to be honest. But we have to remember that when there's a headache and if we stuck to our convictions and we stick to what we think was right and we continue that through, the elation of that getting that win effectively, or the pass, and making that so that everything was acknowledged to be correct is better. I mean, it's a nice feeling, but I think there are mixed emotions throughout the process, of confidence, of agility, of resistance, of sticking it in, and actually self-doubt, because that's normal of a human being, that you do have self-doubt and you start to doubt the process and actually whether it's a fair process, whether it's a right process, whether it's the outcome is going to be there. So yeah, you've just got to stay strong, but challenging most definitely.
Good bring you in, Deb.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, slightly differently, and obviously compared to Matt, primarily because unfortunately it's part of the day-to-day job. That doesn't mean to say that I'm not aware of how taxpayers feel and how our clients feel in this process. So one of the key points when that lands and you become aware that something has gone under compliance review, it's really important that I get to share the fact that we sit within a self-assessment regime. We sit within a regime that says you self-assess your taxes. Let's just stick with corporate tax for now. And by doing so, HMRC have the right to sample check a number of claims and evaluate whether there's any further questions to be answered, or whether there is any suggestion that perhaps doesn't quite meet the scheme requirements. I think from my perspective, it's about balancing. I totally uphold that this is the method and the way in which the regime has to be upheld. But it's also being really mindful and working with clients and having an ability, and certainly in this case with Matt, it's reassuring to or reassurance to be able to say to Matt, look, this is part and parcel of the process. Don't be alarmed. It's not atypical. This happens. In fact, it happens, as you say, ever more in recent times. And without going down a pathway, too much, there is the fact that, fraud and error has caused a great deal of concern, simply because, unfortunately, there's been some really bad actors, bad players in this market. That said, doesn't mean that the stress and the concern and the worries that taxpayers like Matt go through isn't real, because it is real. We had the ability to know that Matt was wholly vested in this, as I am, as our wider team was as part of this. We have a dedicated team to inquiries. And it was that process and knowing that we were committed. We both knew from the outset that we were going to take this all the way, because we wouldn't put a report in that wasn't compliant. Yeah. So again, it's understanding that HMRC have a job to do. Yeah. It's making sure that as a taxpayer, you make them feel that they've got the support and you are, I want to say, standing shoulder to shoulder. Yeah. So I feel that, those are the key parts for me when we go into this zone. And despite the fact that it's not an everyday occurrence, but it's part of my normal activity, it's not part of Matt's normal activity. And it's being aware of that and empathic to that.
Sure. And to expand on that, Matt, obviously, you're a client, so we supported you in the original claim. But how do you felt having to go through that inquiry process alone? Obviously you didn't, and hopefully you had the support and it kind of helped you navigate that journey. But what would it have been like to kind of be by yourself going through that inquiry process?
I think you just summed it up yourself, that actually, or Debs did, that that when you haven't got the knowledge, I know our business like the back of my hand. I know the research and development that we did. I know the process, I know the pain, I know the cost that we incurred. But when you deal with an inquiry, with an HMRC inquiry, it is about the legislation. It's about the law.
Yeah.
We want to make sure. I also agree that there have been some bad actors and there have been some issues with R&D claims that, quite frankly, were not valid. But that's not what we do. And the fact is that we need a partner who understands the process, understands the law, understands the legislation, and actually how we ensure that everything is compliant, everything is in place. And also, you've been through this 150, 200, plus times. I've never been through it.
Yeah.
So you can be strong. I think any SME leader has to be strong. That's I meet many people on my journey, and we're all strong, and we're all. Yeah. I believe that it takes a certain person to be a leader of a business, and but I would have been lost. To be really frank and honest, and even though you can stand by what you've done and the process, it's how you articulate that over the legislation, and that's the point. Because actually, I think the legislation is really subjective. It's one person can see it one way and the other person can see it the other way, and I think that's the thing. Is when you get into a situation where actually, if HMRC say, well, no, it doesn't comply, and we say, well, it does comply, and the person on the street would agree with you, and then another person on the street would disagree with you. It's very difficult, but that's where expertise and skills comes in, and that's why we work with you, because you can be. Everybody needs to be an expert in their own field. I'm sure you guys don't make the chocolate. We know how to make chocolate. We know how to make chocolate, and we know how to run a business, and we believe we do a great job of that. But we're not an expert in the process of R&D in terms of its in terms of an inquiry process. So for me, to have you by our side was a huge help.
Question for you, Dave, if that's okay. When a client goes into inquiry, what are your first priorities when considering that initial response? Mm-hmm. And then to follow on from that, how do you balance technical robustness and extracting the information from that client to help the defence, also with reassurance and sort of helping them navigate the journey they're going to go on?
Yeah, I think one of the key points is making sure that as part of the early part of the process is that I'm going to say client, but in this case it's Matt, that Matt understood and knew that this was not atypical, that it is part of the self-assessment regime, that they have the capability to ask questions upon, post-submission. I won't go to the ins and outs of that, but it was important for him to know that this wasn't necessarily, a targeted inquiry. There is indeed random selection. There are a whole host of reasons why HMRC will open up a compliance check. Obviously going through, as I said previously, about having that demonstration of knowing that we're in it together and we're going to, get to an endpoint conclusion. I think those are massively important. So you talked about the reassurances. On the flip side of that is making sure that we've assessed the type of inquiry. And what I mean by that is who is the instigator. So HMRC, you can be part and parcel of various teams depending on the quantum and size of the business. In Matt's case, we were working with the ISBC team. And by virtue of that generally is more of a volume compliance-led department. Now, again, HMRC have really made some massive headway in recent months in terms of that specific team. But it'd be fair to say at the point that this was opened, we were still in a zone where the compliance check as it was opened was very much a templated set of questions. In fact, I can actually recall that one of the first set of questions was with a relevance to a cost category, and it was a cost category that Matt didn't even have in his claim. So again, I'm not knocking anything, but I'm merely saying is it does lead particularly I think in Matt's case, you start to question, well, hold on, you're asking me a question that is not even valid to my claim. That's a little bit disheartening. So on that basis, we had started off on a process where we didn't have a named caseworker. So we know, therefore, we're going to a generic mailbox, and part of that means that I had to, at least I hope this is how you recollect it as well, that we had to discuss the fact that this wasn't going to be probably a slam dunk in one response, and that there may be a little bit of toing and froing. Obviously, perhaps we'd hoped it hadn't gone as far as long as it did. But things take time. It's part of the process. I'm just very fortunate that in this case, Matt was as vested as I was in making sure that he had a compliant claim. And as such, he should stand by that and see it all the way through. But as I said, it's not easy for every SME to take that approach.
And just to expand on that a little bit further, obviously you were very comfortable in the robustness of the compliance that Gnaw Chocolate were sort of undertaking. Appreciate probably at the time there's a little bit more volatility and more inquiries being opened. But what do you think HMRC are looking to establish when they open an inquiry into a business such as Gnaw? What is it that you're needing to do to kind of respond very constructively in that first response to kind of help, position the business and to navigate that path?
Well, one of the things that's helped the process in the last few years is the inception of the additional information form.
Yes.
So at the very least now we feel and have felt comfortable that HMRC are in receipt of at least a prescriptive level of information, but they understand that there's the projects that are being claimed for and the quantification of those costs associated with them. So from my perspective, usually now I feel more comfortable. There was a time where you would have to absolutely validate that they'd had a receipt of the report and they'd read that report. Now, because of the AIF process, the reality is things get risk profiled, and then ordinarily what will happen is it will go through to either a caseworker or a team, in this case the ISBC team, and then they will regard as to whether, as I said, random selection or just something that they perhaps want to inquire a little further on. Matt, you said something earlier. By its very nature, research and development for tax purposes, and again, we are administering this against a set of guidelines that's very clear, is very much a case of there's a degree of subjectivity. The guidelines are laid out. They need to be applied in a manner that's not taking it out just, section by section, paragraph by paragraph. That specific team. So if I take a simple example, I mentioned about the fact that asking a question that wasn't necessarily relevant, which is frustrating in my opinion. One of the key points is they're looking to evaluate whether they have basically aligned themselves entirely to the guidelines, that the R&D is relevant to the trade, that it is it's compliant for want of the obvious word. It's a compliance review into your compliance. And from that perspective, you are perhaps, again, I'm not wishing to knock this team, but you're perhaps dealing with someone that is quite early in their journey, early in their own tax journey, never mind R&D. So what we want to do when the inquiry comes in is really assess the questions that they're asking. Try not to take that from a personal stance, but just see it as that everyone's got a job to do. And then push back on the certain points where perhaps to begin with, it's very much just evaluating the technological uncertainties, making certain clarifications on the work performed, the personnel involved in those pieces of work. But also it's about assessing it against the DSIC guidelines. It was the BAYS at the time, but DSIC guidelines, and having the ability to just see that it meets that criteria.
Well, that was my next question. So, we'll go straight into that one. My question was very much, Matt, sitting here today, you're reflecting on that, the inquiry that you've just been through. What are your frustrations? And also just what are your reflections on what that actual process is for an SME? Was it more challenging than you thought it was going to be? And where are the things that you think the system just doesn't quite get it right?
I think frustration, actually. I like to be calm under pressure because I think taking a step back and as Deb said, actually, they are doing a job. Those officers are doing a job. They're doing a job that I would hope to the best of their ability. Does it mean that I wasn't frustrated? No, not really, because I think fundamentally again, as Deb said, that when you're changing caseworkers all the time, there's a different view on everything.
Yeah.
And the legislation is clear. It is clear. Do I believe we met that criteria? Yes. Do I believe that there were enough expertise or consistent expertise across the different caseworkers? No. And I think that's the feedback. The feedback is, how on earth can you start at position A and then somebody looks at it and has their own thoughts? And then they ask for some information. And then it comes back in, and then someone else looks at it and then asks different information or somewhat the same information. And then we go to C, and the same thing happens again. And in our case, we went in circles. So we were asked information, we provided information, we were then asked for further information, and then we were asked for the same information again from another caseworker that we'd already answered. And I think that's the frustration. And as someone who, I'm busy, I'm trying to create and build a business here that pays tax, that employs people, and that adds to society. And time is being taken up by things that are valid. I've got no problem being, taking up time that if they're valid questions, but let's not waste time here. Let's not repeat ourselves. Let's not, let's get the consistency, because the consistency saves our time and actually the HMRC's time as well. And time is money, and that's a fact. So I think the frustrations came in, and particularly towards the end when we're continuously being asked the same questions again, and when we're having to repeat ourselves. But I guess that's learning, and there's nothing wrong with learning. And so, as Deb said, that the process has started and it's been getting better, and the additional information form is probably definitely required. So I'm pleased that that's in, because actually it gives some context. And it gives them more background, time for background information, because nobody's perfect. I'm not perfect. HMRC aren't perfect. The caseworkers aren't perfect. And so I think we have to be fair, but let's be more consistent. Let's possibly, if we know that it would be more efficient if one caseworker looked at the whole thing from start to finish. I don't know exactly what the numbers or percentage of claims that are reviewed and that are inquired, but as it's getting more or increasing, let's say, then maybe that would be a process, an important thing. So I think that frustration is what actually SME owners or leaders or business owners get frustrated with, and then walk away, or and then actually say, is this worth it anymore? Because we don't have the time. Yeah. It's simply that we just don't have the time, and then you have to start weighing up: is that time valued? Is it worthwhile being invested in my business, or is it worthwhile continuing with the claim? So I think from a message, from our experience, definitely would be, let's have some more consistency. Maybe it would be a good idea to have one caseworker throughout the whole process, as opposed to chopping and changing, because it certainly costs us time and money, and I don't think it's efficient for HMRC either.
Sure. And just to pick up on something you said a couple of moments ago, just taking a step back, obviously, despite the inquiry that you've just been through, do you still believe R&D tax relief is a valuable benefit to your business? Do you think as a scheme as a whole, it adds, it creates the value that you think it should?
So, as I said a few moments ago, I think there have been some bad actors. I think the whole scheme needed to be tightened up, because let's be honest, we're taxpayers. We want our money spent in the right way. And there's I think any business owner has that feeling, because it's that feeling of giving back. And so, do we want to see billions of pounds wasted and into fraudulent claims? No. Do I think it adds value if it's, as long as you're compliant, and you know that you're compliant, and you believe in what you're doing, and you're being true and honest? Absolutely. I think the UK as a whole needs to play. It needs to be competitive. We are in a market that is stagnant, where growth is non-existent, and we need to find ways and continue to encourage businesses to invest here. And if you don't have a valid R&D process, then people won't come and invest here. They'll invest in other markets that do have that. Yeah. Do we have to be tighter on it, and do we have to control it and make sure that it's fair and that taxpayers' money is being spent the right way? Absolutely. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think for us as a business, it adds value because we are genuine in our claim and our process and what we're doing. We are trying to push on. We're trying to build innovation. We are trying to do things to make ourselves more efficient, more profitable. Growth as a business. We're targeting further growth this year, and in that process, we're happy to push our boundaries and push what we can do. Do I think that R&D? If I say that R&D is a part of our DNA, yes, it goes in peaks and troughs. Some years we don't do so much, and some years we do a lot more. And I think with this claim that we're speaking about, we just built a new factory, an expensive new factory for the size of business that we are, and we went through a huge amount of development and new machinery and R&D. Our processes and technological uncertainties, if I can say the word, were absolutely there. We tried to fix those solutions. So I think going forward, the UK needs to continue. It needs to continue on its path. We need to allow R&D. We need to be fair to the taxpayer. We need to be fair to the Treasury. Everyone needs to play their part. If it's taken away, investment will go elsewhere.
Yeah.
And so for me, it has to stay. It has to be here. And I think the process where HMRC are doing a tightening up is fair.
Yeah.
But also, let's have some consistency. Let's go back to the previous point. Let's stop wasting people's times by changes that could be easily implemented. I don't see that there's any harm in having one caseworker all the way through a process. There's that is a cheaper, more efficient process than it is having 3 or 4 different caseworkers come in. The cost is the same to HMRC, exactly the same. They're still paying those wages, but actually it's better for us, it's better for the taxpayer, it's better for HMRC, it's better for the Treasury.
Sure. There's really, really valid points there. So, thank you. It's really, really interesting. Just jumping back onto the actual inquiry side, I think inquiries are probably here to stay for a while. We have sort of peaks and troughs of, you hear a sort of a surge of inquiries have been opened, and then it sort of calms down a little bit, but they're here to stay. So I guess from your point, Deb, and it'd be great to get your input into this one as well, Matt. What does good inquiry support look like? Obviously it's very fundamental to a lot of what you do every day, Deb, but what does good look like in this world of inquiries and supporting SMEs and clients on that journey?
Well, I think first and foremost is making sure that whomever you are working with to do your R&D claim, that they are indeed offering inquiry support. I am aware that all are not made equal, shall we say. So I think it's important for people when they sign up to a provider that they really check the T's and C's, make sure that this is part and parcel of the journey. From the perspective of what good looks like, key thing is that the client, Matt, I'm going to ask you this one, but they feel that you are shouldering this with them, that you are taking the heavy lifting, you are doing everything you can to make that process as pain-free as possible. Obviously, you're not entirely in control, but you need to understand the nature of how HMRC operate. I do think that Matt's example was a time where the ISBC team were still, as I said, still in a very different zone about the volume level of compliance. I feel it's only fair to state that things have massively changed and moved forward.
So I think we're bringing this session to a close. So if I could just come to you, Matt, to end this session. Lessons learned? Anything you would say has been your kind of, overwhelming lesson from what you've been through? And I guess kind of connected to that, if you were talking to another fellow CEO, M&D, business owner who was making R&D tax credit claims, potentially was at the start of that inquiry journey, what would you say?
I would say expect it to be tough. Reality is that if you're conducting R&D and you stand by everything that you're putting into a claim, then nothing to worry about whatsoever. And I think that's the way it should be anyway. Get yourself a good partner. And what I mean by that is, I said earlier that this is a partnership, and I can't genuinely thank Debs and the team and Ash and everybody at Source Advisors more, because the reality is that without them, we wouldn't be where we are with this claim, even though we stand by everything that we did in this in with our R&D. It's about having that strength and that a friendship in so many ways. It's not just about, when you are busy and stressed and got a million different things going on, you need somebody by your side who understands the law, who understands the process, as you said, that understands what levers to pull and to make sure that we're doing things completely compliant. And actually, we're answering questions the way that they need to be answered to get to the outcome, but legitimately. But, for me, when I was told that the case was closed, it was a moment of elation and also appreciation. And I mean that wholeheartedly, because I couldn't have done it without you. And that's a fact. And I hope it's been a journey for you guys as well. It's certainly a journey for me. I think as long as you have the right team by your side, and I think this is in all walks of life, but if you have the right team by your side who know their stuff and who know the legislation and know everything, as you said, the compliance that HMRC have to hold themselves to as well. I would never have known that, and I wholeheartedly believe that if we didn't have you by our side within this claim, we wouldn't have got the outcome. So I will say thank you. And I've said it, many times before, but I genuinely mean it, that, thanks for everything that you did for us, and thanks for being there as a support, and not just as I don't look at it as, oh yeah, we're a business and you're a supplier. This is actually a partnership, and a partnership where we work together, we work for the same goals, work for the same, we want the same things, and we want honesty, and we want justice, and we want all those things that, that to be right. So, for me, it's been eyes wide open. We have learnt an awful lot. I know so much more about the process than ever before, and ever thought I would probably ever need to know. But I would say to anyone that's listening to this that go into it with eyes wide open, understanding that if you are sure on the process that you've done and the R&D that you've done that is fully compliant, don't back down. Stick to your guns. You have to be resilient, but you will be if you own a business anyway. Resilient and controlled, and keep calm and utilize your expertise by your side, because they're the ones that know the process better than you. But just because time is short, and because you've got other priorities, don't back out of it when you know that you are right.
What a great way to end the video. Love it. Thanks both. It's been a really, really interesting conversation. Obviously, particularly thanks to you, Matt, for making the time to join us today.
Welcome.
It's really appreciated. Great. Really, really interesting. Thank you for joining us at this At Source video. Please do check out the other videos in the series, and hopefully you'll find some really interesting content. Thank you.